times have you tossed out old food thinking they had gone bad? Probably countless times. Maybe you didn't even have to. Let's look at these 17 foods that you can safely stockpile and never have to throw away because they never expire if you store them correctly. Number 1. Powdered milk. Unlike real milk, non-fat powdered milk lasts forever if you keep it in the freezer. And even if it's not frozen, it stays safe to use for over a decade after its best by date in a cool, dry place. But it must be unopened and preserved in an airtight container. Number 2. Pure maple syrup. As long as you store it in your freezer, it will keep indefinitely. But make sure that it's pure maple syrup. And don't worry, because maple syrup doesn't freeze, you don't have to wait for it to thaw when you want to use it. In case it crystallizes, place your maple syrup container in hot water or just boil the syrup. If you prefer to store your unopened maple syrup in the pantry, it will last for about a year and another year in the refrigerator after it's been opened, according to USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture. Avoid the ones in a plastic container, as glass jars keep the syrup from darkening and extend its shelf life even more. To see our top recommended completely organic maple syrup that comes in a glass jar, check out the Amazon link in our video description below. Number 3. Honey. Just like maple syrup, this miraculous food never spoils thanks to its high sugar content, low amount of moisture, and high acidity, which prevent bacteria and other organisms from growing in the jar. Even after you open it, even if it's crystallized, and even if it's been sitting in your kitchen for years, it's still perfectly safe to eat according to the USDA. In fact, it is reported that archaeologists have discovered thousands of years old honey in ancient Egyptian tombs, still unspoiled and edible. Only the quality of the honey may decline after the first 12 months of storage, but it is never a safety concern, so you can still eat it. If your honey crystallized or became solid, simply microwave it a few times, stirring during the intervals, or put the honey jar in hot water. Check out the link below in the description for our fan favorite organic honey of choice. Number 4. Dried beans. If you keep them in a sealed package or an airtight container away from sunlight and heat, dried beans last forever. The only downside is that they take a little longer to cook when they're old because it may be more difficult to soften them. A smart tip is to soak them overnight in water mixed with some baking soda before cooking. But regardless of their age, dried beans preserve their nutritional value. Indeed, a study by Brigham Young University in Utah found that 32-year-old canned pinto beans were still edible and retained their protein content. Number 5. Salt. This natural preservative does not have an expiration date even if there's a best by date on the package. But try to store it in an airtight container and make sure it doesn't get damp. That being said, salt you keep in your shaker for everyday use might still clump up because it tends to absorb water vapor from the air. We have a great tip for you to minimize that. Throw 2 or 3 grains of uncooked rice into your salt shaker so that they can absorb the moisture and prevent clumping. We should also add that if your salt is iodized, its shelf life could be limited to 5 years. Number 6. Uncooked white rice. If you store it properly, uncooked white rice has an indefinite shelf life. This means you should keep it in an airtight container, sealed bag, or a glass jar so that it's safe from bugs. Brown rice, on the other hand, is not an unperishable food due to its high oil content. Number 7. Vinegar. Because it's fermented and high in acidity, vinegar is a self-preserving item, so it never expires and it doesn't even need refrigeration. A cellar or pantry is the perfect place to store your vinegar in. Just make sure it is a cool spot and not exposed to sunlight. Also, don't leave it uncovered and put the bottle cap back on after you use it. While apple cider vinegar and white distilled vinegar remain unchanged, some other type of vinegar may display color changes or develop sediment over time. But don't worry, because this is just a change of appearance and does not affect the vinegar's safety, so it is still perfectly safe to consume no matter how old your vinegar is. Number 8. Instant coffee. If you store it in your freezer, instant coffee will remain safe to consume basically forever, even if it's not sealed. And when it's not frozen but kept in an airtight package in a cool and dry storage space, it still keeps for decades. But beware, that is not the case for regular coffee at all, because it might technically get moldy over time. Number 9. Sugar. Another essential kitchen item that stays safe to eat indefinitely because it doesn't allow bacteria to grow. And it doesn't only apply to white sugar. Whether it's brown sugar, powdered, or another kind, rest assured you can keep it in your pantry for a lifetime. The key here is to store it away from heat and moisture. It might still start to harden and get clumpy after 2 or 3 years, but it never spoils. Number 10. Soy sauce. The great news is an unopened bottle of soy sauce never goes bad because it's fermented. You don't even have to put it in the fridge. But what about after you open it? Well, if you keep it refrigerated, it would still be good for about 3 years. Number 11. Tea. Another kitchen staple that stays non-perishable as long as it's stored in a dry place. So do not be confused when you see an expiration date on your tea box because it only means the flavor of the tea may decrease after that date. But you can still safely drink it. Number 12. Dried pasta. An unopened box of dry pasta keeps indefinitely in your dark and cool pantry. The only effect time will have on it would be a decrease in freshness, so keep that in mind when you check out that expiration date on the box. After you open it though, it is recommended to be consumed within a year. In any case, make sure that tiny insects or moths did not make their way into the box because they can do that even if you haven't opened it yet. Number 13. Oats. If you store them in an airtight container, oats can last for years in your pantry. It is even safer to keep them in the fridge or freezer to prevent them from molding or bugs from getting in. And they wouldn't even lose their flavor in the meantime. However, that may not be the case for instant oats or flavored versions as they tend to spoil over time. So basically, you can safely eat old oats as long as they were not touched by bugs or mold. Number 14. Coconut oil. Unrefined virgin coconut oil is probably the cooking oil with the longest shelf life when stored properly. But do not confuse it with refined coconut oil, which should be consumed in less than 2 years once you open it, because the refining process shortens its durability. Number 15. Cornstarch. Seal your cornstarch tightly after you open it and keep it away from moisture and insects in a cool, dry spot. That is the magic formula to have it last for a lifetime. Number 16. Popcorn kernels. Loose popcorn kernels remain safe to eat indefinitely in your pantry when they're kept cool and dry. But don't forget that it doesn't apply to microwave popcorn packets because they contain oil and other substances which can spoil over time. If your old kernels would not pop, here's a brilliant tip. Get them wet with a little bit of water and wait for a few days until they soften. Number 17. Vanilla extract. Pure vanilla extract, which is a staple in baking, doesn't really have an expiration date because it contains around 35% alcohol. It also never loses its freshness or flavor. Just make sure to seal it after each use. Don't forget to subscribe to Food Clan.